When I was younger and I didn't know better, living with these
Hi,
words
everyone.
and
Thank you for
forbidden.
joining us today. We're gonna let folks kind of trickle in and join us, and we'll start in about 2 to 3 minutes. But thank you again for joining us, and yeah, 2 3 minutes.
And the sunlight has sleep
Today
better
we're playing Ravina,
you
if
around.
only in celebration of API
Sometimes I
Heritage Month.
still awake from you calling out. It's too late to hold me, too late to call me to. You're saying the phone. I could get over you. It's too late to know me. I'm going without you. You're saying the phone, the phone. I said I made you off the freeway lonely. You still don't understand a woman's holy. Your fake apologies would work on the old me. I get into my car, leave you where you are. I sleep better at night without you around. Sometimes I still awake from you calling out. It's too late
Everyone,
to
for
hold
joining.
me,
We'll start in
too
about
late to call me
1 minute.
through. You're
Folks in
saying
the
the
room, I'm seeing
phone
here.
line. I could get over you. It's too late
Hi,
to
Arnell.
hold me. I'm
My
going
mom is here. Hi, Mom.
with you're saying the phone line. The
All the
phone line.
partners here, colleagues, for joining us today. Just give us 1 more minute. Get started. Thank you, Marilis. All right, everyone. Good afternoon. Happy Friday. It is day 5, our final day of AJSOCAL's AAPI Immigrant Justice webinar series. If you've joined us every day this week, thank you so much for joining again today. If it's your first time, welcome. We're super happy to have you here today. My name is Jeff DeGia, and I use he, him, his pronouns, and I'm a policy advocate here at AJSOCAL. We are the nation's largest API serving social justice organization that protects and strengthens the rights and dignity of the APEC community. Thank you all for joining us again today to learn more about API immigration. The API community is the fastest growing racial and ethnic group, with over half of Asian Americans being born in another country, which means most members of our community are related to or are themselves an immigrant. Immigration is a core part of our identity and our community, has deep impacts on our community. However, when we talk about immigration, it is often spoken in sweeping terms, leaving out the unique experiences of the APEC community. This makes our community's experiences invisible and susceptible to stereotypes that can cause us lasting harm in our fight for equity, justice, and visibility. Throughout this week, we have learned about the API immigrant experience and why looking at immigration through a nuanced lens is so important to understand the complex needs and experiences of our community. Through these discussions, we have learned why understanding these perspectives is so important in our advocacy and allyship. And today, we wrap up our series with a discussion on what role immigration plays in abuse and domestic violence. AJ SoCal's Survivor and Family Empowerment or SAFE team will share their expertise and share about the struggles that their clients are facing today with increased attacks on immigrants. Please note that today discussion will cover sensitive and difficult themes. So if you need to, please take a break or step away from the computer to take care of yourself. And with that said, I would like to introduce our speakers today, people from my favorite team, one of my favorite teams at the organization, um, Katrina and Barbara. So,
Thank you so much, Jeff. And I just want to say thank you all for being here on a Friday afternoon. Before I start, I really, really want to thank Mary Elise and Jeff and the entire AG SoCal policy team for putting this all together, and as well as for all of the panelists who have shown up this week and for you who participated, because everyone showing up and showing out really affirms this need of the AAPI community that we need to support each other, and that how many of us want to support each other, and what we want to learn more from each other and know what we need. So, and how to provide that support. So thank you all so much. My name is Katrina. I'm Katrina Espina. I'm the managing director of the Community Justice Unit of AJSOCAL, but I'm also the acting director of our Survivor and Family Empowerment Unit. I'm going to let Barbara introduce herself when she comes on in a little bit, but if you could go on to the next slide, I'm going to give a little more of a disclaimer. The next one too. Um, so as Jeff prefaced a little bit, this presentation discusses a lot of topics, including domestic violence and trauma, systemic barriers, that may or will be distressing for a lot of us. And so it's for educational and awareness purposes only. It's not intended to be um, legal advice, and it's in the context of the AAPI communities. So at any time, if you need to take care of your well-being and step away, like Jeff said, please do so. Do what you need to do to process all of this. The whole purpose of this is to process and kind of put a human face and humanity to the stories that you may hear, so then you understand the realities of what our API community and the immigrant community face every day, particularly our survivors. Okay, next slide. So, a little bit about our Survivor and Family Empowerment Unit. We provide free legal services exclusively to domestic violence and elder abuse, civil harassment survivors, with a strong focus on Indigenous and limited English speaking members of the LA and Orange County AAPI community. And we help them in their family law matters and with trauma-informed and culturally sensitive care. And we're really proud. So if we go to the next slide. Again, I'm putting a face. So I also want to put a practicality to this. So I am very proud to be part and lead a very, very small but mighty and passionate team of advocates and attorneys that really do our best to support as many survivors as possible. There's myself, there's Lucia Kim, who is a senior staff attorney who's actually on maternity leave, and I'm wishing her, wherever she is, a almost happy Mother's Day. Barbara, who you'll meet in a little bit, our staff attorney who is kicking butt in everything she's doing right now, and Christine and Patrick, who are providing us the support we need as incredible advocates and program specialists that have amazing experience in the legal field and social services field to support our survivors. So our team is small but mighty when I say so. When we tell our stories, you have to know that we get a lot of calls every day, and I'll explain that a little bit. But with this team, last year, I'm really proud that we were able to assist at least 502 survivors in year of 2025 alone. And so we do what we can, and we'll explain what we can do. But a lot of what we do is very heavy, and and when we go to court, I went to court earlier this week in Orange County, and a lot of people come up to us and say like, hey, this is really heavy. Why do you do what you do? If we go to the next slide, I have kind of like some stats about why we do it, which is we get to help really good people at like reaching their very worst. And what does this mean? If you see these statistics, it's jarring, the amount of individuals that experience domestic violence and intimate partner violence or family violence every day. And it happens when you don't see it. It happens when it's hidden. And for our communities particularly, it's more jarring because there are additional barriers that they have to face. And I'm really proud that AG SoCal is a part of a very small niche of legal assistance services that provide culturally informed and in language care to our survivors. And so that means that we are uniquely tailored to assist the AAPI community in their needs, realizing that they have particular stigmas or cultural barriers that sometimes prevent them from getting the assistance or the justice that they deserve. And so, in order to assist in the healing, I really, really value what we do. And so, one of the greatest values that we provide is that because we are well known in the community, now the LA and Orange County courts refer many of their Asian speaking cases to us, and we're really, really proud of that statistic. So we go to the next slide. This is kind of what we do as a whole. We assist with restraining orders in our family. They're all in family court. And we also assist in family law matters, including divorce and separation, custody and parentage, all listed here. And the next slide. So you can only imagine the difficulties aside from the trauma that a survivor has to experience in a domestic violence situation, in obtaining the relief they need. So this is a very simplified version of the timeline of what it would take to get a restraining order. And I'm going to go over it. And I want you to think about when I describe it, you have to think about the extra barriers that if you were in a new country, if you didn't have financial support, if you didn't have resources, if you didn't know the language, how difficult any of this may be. And so we assist in completing restraining order forms. There are a multitude of forms, judicial council forms that need to be completed. And then ideally, that would be submitted to the court. And then if the court deems that it's necessary or appropriate at the time from reviewing your paperwork, the judge will then issue a temporary restraining order, then set a hearing within 21 days of your filing. And then ideally, we'll have the sheriff's department submit the paperwork, serve the paperwork, which is required in person to the adverse party or the abuser. And then that has to happen at least 5 days prior to the restraining order hearing. And this happens very quickly and with not a lot of time and with not a lot of bandwidth from the survivor because they've just experienced something serious that caused them to seek this relief. And oftentimes where we have trouble is that if there are clerical errors in some of the paperwork, then that causes the sheriff's department not to be able to serve the paperwork or process the paperwork so they're allowed to serve the paperwork, or we're not able to serve the abuser on time and because they're evading service, and so then the matter gets delayed or dismissed sometimes, or we're unable to find an interpreter even though they're required by the court to be present. I've seen where hearings don't take place until a year after the abuse was reported, simply because there's so many different bureaucratic delays that may happen or difficulties that many of our survivors may face. And so it can be very difficult, but we try to make it as simple as possible for them or easier in helping them in the situation. And the next slide is another flow chart. And this is, I will say, so I'm trying to humanize the experience and see what our survivors have to go through. And if you look at this chart, it's actually provided by one of our courts. I love giving this in presentations, but this is everything aside from the domestic violence restraining order. If you were to go for a divorce or a custody case in the family court, these are all the processes that you'd have to go through and the flow chart that you would have to follow in the California court system. I've been practicing for 13 years. I'm aging myself, but I've been practicing for 13 years. It's not simple. And if you're facing the barriers that many of our survivors have to face, you can only imagine how daunting it may be and sometimes discouraging it could be for you to seek any of this relief, to finally get to where you could see in the bottom right of the screen to the judgment after all of that you have to go through. But our job is to navigate through that system. And so our hope is that with our assistance and with like further knowledge, our survivors are able to get through it and as seamlessly as possible. Next slide. Okay, so this is how we help. We could either provide full legal representation where we represent the client in court, or we provide in pro per services where the client represents themselves and then we prepare them for the hearing, or we prepare the paperwork for them and help them in filing and serving it. Or at the very least, we provide counsel and advice or referrals to anyone that comes to us. But yeah, this is how we can help. Again, we're trying to like humanize the experience and try to put a face and an understanding as to what our survivors would face. But to speak about what particularly impacts the API community, if you go to the next slide, Barbara will explain how our families are currently under pressure, in addition to what they have to deal with domestic violence.
Okay, hi everybody. So as Katrina has mentioned, my name is Barbara. I am one of the SAFE attorneys. SAFE stands for Survivor and Family Empowerment, otherwise known as our family law unit. So today I will be discussing the intersectionality between domestic violence and immigration, specifically through the lens of AAPI population. However, as a disclaimer, it goes without saying that domestic violence can happen to anyone, any gender, any age, not limited to only our AAPI immigrants. But just for the purposes of today's discussion, we will be examining domestic violence as it happens within our Asian communities, especially during this political time. Can we go to the points, please? Thank you. So, as mentioned, we will discuss obstacles that our immigrant survivors face in this current immigration landscape. Next slide, please. Okay, I will go over coercive control, what it means, and sort of how it's manifested under an immigration context. To start off, as listed on the slide, a common misconception that people believe is that abuse is only physical. Well, the reality is that abuse is not only physical. Some examples of non-physical abuse include exercising control, coercion through intimidation, verbal threats, financial abuse, and even emotional abuse. Oftentimes our clients do not realize that weaponizing someone's immigration status during a relationship is even a means of control or abuse. Another common myth that we hear that is out there is that if it was that bad, he or she would have left already. So unfortunately, this perspective disregards what is called the cycle of abuse. The cycle of abuse refers to the different stages a relationship that has domestic violence in it that it goes through. Oftentimes the abuse is not every single day. And because it's not every single day, this instills some hope that there's like some possibility for change. So why someone who is in an abusive relationship might consider staying. So the reality is that the survivors sometimes choose to stay for a whole host of reasons. One being that some survivors could even fear the potential of greater harm coming to them if they were to leave. For example, we do have clients that call us and talk to us about how their partner has threatened them that if they were to ever leave, their partner would potentially report them to ICE to get them deported. So in this context, our client sometimes chooses to stay, in this abusive relationship due to that fear of deportation, especially with that being very real right now in this political climate. Next slide, please. Okay, so continuing with other common myths. As the first point, it's a family matter. Well, domestic violence is against the law, so it's not just a family matter. The next common myth sort of echoes the first one we just discussed. This is how women are treated in my culture. The reality, again, is that domestic violence is against the law, and so culture is never an acceptable explanation for domestic violence. The last common myth, a very sad and unfortunate one, is he or she probably did something to deserve it. Victim blaming happens, and victim blaming is sort of the abuser's attempt to downplay what they did or relieve themselves of responsibility for their own actions. For our immigrant survivors, sometimes once a survivor or client does come to us seeking advice on leaving an abusive relationship, we often hear their abuser is now trying to shift that narrative to try to say that he or she probably only married me for a green card, which is a narrative that discounts that possibility that a survivor would leave as a result of domestic violence, or that it must just be an ulterior motive. Next slide, please. Okay, so moving on. We spoke a lot about different examples of myths in domestic violence and coercive control. So here we have on this slide an official definition of what is coercive control. So as mentioned before, it is non-physical abuse, which can include patterns of acts or behaviors that abusers use to take away freedom or control of another's life, which can be done through isolation, intimidation, and emotional abuse. Coercive control has not always been recognized under the law as abuse. However, as of September 2020, Senate Bill 1141 was signed and went into effect as of January 2021. So how this has played out for us as practitioners is that in court, the judge can now no longer deny a restraining order based off of the absence of physical abuse alone. And they must consider sort of the totality of the circumstances on whether there was coercive control in deciding if there was abuse in a relationship. Next slide, please. Okay, so here we have Family Code Section 6320, subsection C. So again, Senate Bill 1141, as mentioned before, did officially make coercive control abuse recognized under law, and that was officially codified in Family Code Section 6320. So just reading that definition, disturbing the peace of the other party refers to conduct that, based on the totality of the circumstances, destroys the mental or emotional calm of the other party, which, as it states, can include, but is not limited to, coercive control. Next slide, please. Continuing with the Family Code section. So some examples of coercive control, again, non-physical abuse, include in isolating the victim from family members or friends, like, isolating them basically from their support system, depriving the victim of basic necessities like food, clothing, shelter, finances. That goes into the next subsection, control, financial control. And then you will see here on subsection 4 on the slide that the law has written in it that threats based on actual or suspected immigration status is abuse. So I just wanted to highlight this because, unfortunately, as I mentioned earlier, some of our clients that come to us seeking advice, they don't even know that sometimes they don't even know that they're in an abusive relationship due to the lack of physical abuse. And so it's only after talking to them and sort of hearing the other things that are going on that we can explain that, well, there is something called coercive control that's recognized under the law, that is recognized as abuse. Next slide, please. Okay, next I will talk about some obstacles our limited English-speaking survivors face in pursuing domestic violence restraining orders. For the first point, even escaping the abusive home can be an obstacle, especially if the survivor has nowhere to go, and especially in the context of perhaps they were even relied on their abuser completely financially. Another obstacle we often see that there are language barriers that come up when the survivor does end up ultimately calling 911. sometimes the abuser is the only one that speaks English. And unfortunately, sometimes might also even be the only one that's providing translations to police officers and the survivor. So sort of further controlling that narrative. Another example is finding resources that help with restraining order initiation. That can be difficult, especially if the survivor doesn't know where to even start or begin. And then lastly, sometimes if the survivor is able to finally get to the courthouse to get assistance with filing a restraining order, oftentimes we hear feedback that they were only able to speak to maybe a phone translator only for less than an hour. And they worry that their story was not really accurately described in the restraining order documents. Next slide, please. Okay, so now we will wrap it up with some survivor concerns that we have heard. As mentioned before, the possibility of abuse. Sometimes, as mentioned before, sometimes we hear from our survivors that one of their concerns is the possibility of abuse only worsening if they end up leaving, right? As mentioned, the fear of deportation. Further, we've even heard nowadays fear in even going to court proceedings if there's a possibility of ICE presence at the courthouse. So I've mentioned all of these obstacles and fears. What can we ultimately do about it as a community, in our community? We must continue to spread awareness on domestic violence topics. This can be done through community outreach, education. We definitely should discuss and promote safety planning with our survivors on no matter what stage they are in that relationship, whether they're choosing to stay or to leave, discuss safety planning. And lastly, most importantly, always listen without judgment. And that is it for me. I believe we are going to bring it back to Katrina for the next slide.
Yes. Thank you, Barbara. And so I'm going to tell the story of one of our clients that was assisted by our SAFE team. We're going to call her Chen, but that's not her real name, but she's graciously agreed to share her story because she understands the importance of letting our survivors know that they're not alone. And so that's the purpose of me sharing the story today, but also everything that Barbara described, unfortunately, in terms of coercive control, Chen experienced. And I want you all to have an understanding of how that impacted her in the court in real time. So Chen was referred to AJSOCAL by one of our shelter affiliates and who we work closely with because her abuser had taken her and their children to their home country and abandoned Chen and the minor children there after taking the children's passports, birth certificates, and other essential documents. Chen's abuser then attempted to file for emergency divorce in their home country. When the judge there denied his emergency request, the abuser flew back to the United States and filed an emergency request to obtain full legal and physical custody over the children, falsely claiming that Chen had abducted the children, when in actuality he had abandoned them there. This is when AJSOCAL and one of our SAFE attorneys stepped in to represent Chen. We filed an opposition to Chen's abuser's request and an emergency request for a domestic violence restraining order to prevent his ongoing acts of abuse and control. The filings our team prepared included sworn statements from our client and Chen's neighbor who witnessed the abuse that she suffered firsthand when they lived here in California, including horrible incidents of coercive control, including isolation of Chen, video surveillance of her, and retaliation and threats if Chen ever attempted to leave, and even deprivation of food and basic necessities. Our team also had to file a motion for Chen to be able to testify remotely from her home country where she had been abandoned at the hearing on her requests, which was granted by the court. In response, Chen's abuser then hired multiple attorneys to represent him, and they all argued that the court here in California did not have jurisdiction to hear Chen's requests because she was no longer residing in California, and the alleged acts of abuse did not take place in California. But The court was then forced to set a jurisdiction hearing to determine whether or not Chen's requests could be heard and decided here in California. And then ultimately at those hearings, after argument and evidence presented, it was determined that it could be heard because the acts of abuse took place here. And then Chen submitted testimony from the witness located here in California. So finally, after all of this, the court set a hearing on Chen's request for a restraining order. The hearing took 2 long days of argument and presentation of evidence, including testimony, but it resulted in the court granting Chen a 3-year domestic violence restraining order and orders requiring her abuser to return the children's passports and birth certificates so that they can safely return to the United States with our client. But it didn't end there. After that, Chen's abuser then claimed that he had lost the passports, and the court then had to set several more hearings to secure the abuser's compliance. And after arguments from our safe attorney, the court then ordered that Chen should be allowed to apply for the children's passports without her abuser's permission or consent. The court also sanctioned Chen's abuser for his noncompliance and then awarded Chen attorney's fees and costs caused by the abuser's abuse, amounting almost $5,000 to be paid by the abuser. Also, unfortunately, Chen had to suffer years of coercive control and abuse, and going through hearing, which took years to get this relief. Thankfully, our team and our safe attorney were able to assist her. But this is just a reminder that Chen is not the only survivor that goes through this on a daily basis. And many of them either don't have the resources to get the same relief that our survivor client was able to receive. And further, as Barbara described, many of our survivors are faced with fears, familiar pressure, unfamiliarity of the legal system, and language barriers that prevent them from seeking help. But if you go to the next slide, we're here to help. And so to our survivors, please remember you're not alone. We're here to help you. Call us if you can. We're here to help you in your language. And to everyone here, I love to quote one of our former SAFE advocates, who is now an AJSOCAL attorney, Ariana De Los Reyes. Our community is only stronger when our survivors are supported. And so it means so much this Mother's Day weekend and API Heritage Month, and at the end of this great week of webinars, that you all are here today. So thank you very much.
All right. Thank you, Barbara and Katrina, for the main session. So now we'll be starting our Q&A part of this webinar. So I have one question in the chat so far, which I think is for Barbara, which is a family code section state or federal?
State.
Oh, it's state. Okay, yes. So that's California law currently. Okay. We have a few more questions we can answer as well. And again, y'all, if you have questions, please feel free to drop them in the Q&A function at the bottom of the Zoom. Okay, one question we have is, what unique barriers do API immigrant survivors face when seeking safety and support from domestic violence?
Barbara, I can take that if it's okay. Well, she described a good amount of them, and you could imagine the barriers that Chen had reached. But right now, what we're experiencing with our callers and our clients is that survivors are getting a lot of threats that they will be reported to ICE or removed. That without their partner, they're either gonna be put in detention or reported to USCIS. And there's a reality to that, right? There's a reality that many of them may lose their status. We've had a lot of survivors, there's uptick in survivors where their partners have now withdrawn their petitions that are active, which now kind of put the red flag on their USCIS files. And so there's more of a risk for our survivors now. But there is relief that can be provided, thankfully, through VAWA petitions and U visa petitions. There's also the special immigrant juvenile status relief that's provided for many of the children who are abandoned or abused by their parents. And so our organization's here to help with all of those things. But those are the biggest barriers. I mentioned before too, language support is a really big one. Our courts are inundated with a lot of cases every day. The dockets for domestic violence, restraining order, and just restraining order departments, they're just only for restraining orders. I've seen it where they've had 20 cases to be heard in one morning. And it took a very long time to describe a very simplified version of Chen's story to you. So just imagine having to hear those stories over and over again and giving the due diligence to each of those stories, so that our survivors can reach justice. It's a hard job for our judicial officers. But in addition, we have a shortage of interpreters in both LA and Orange County. And so, like I mentioned before, I've had cases that where, the clerks have to tell us, we don't have an interpreter for you, so you have to bring your own interpreter. And that can be impossible. Or our interpreter can't make it today, so then your hearing is going to be continued for another 3 months. And so, and you have to imagine we're prepping our clients. They have to, in order for them to get the relief, they have to retell their stories, and that's the risk of re-traumatization. And so I've had clients where they've said enough is enough. I'm done with this process. I don't want it continued anymore. And no fault of their own, or just like because of the logistics of court, they decide I'm just going to withdraw and just, it's easier to reconcile with my abuser. So it happens. But those are the kind of unique barriers that we try to assist with. I always love to quote Nikki, our policy director, because she pointed out to me that when we're assisting in language, the resources for our organization, it's times three. It's less. And then it's also the interpreter. It's also anyone who has to do written translation. And our A-Lab clients, they're fantastic. They do great work. But there's only so much of us. And so there's difficulties for everyone. But we try to support as much as we can, but those are really significant barriers that our survivors experience every day.
Thank you for the answer, Katrina. And I kind of want to highlight that when he mentioned the quote that you shared, because that 3 times or maybe even larger, I think, like, sure, population-wise, APIs might be a smaller percentage, but I think it also makes the point that, like, API serving organizations who do legal support is even smaller too.
Right.
When you have a few partners like us who are around who can offer that kind of expertise, we're stretched super thin, having to show up for our survivors, for our community members. And I just don't think people realize just it's another barrier for why people get scared or why they get maybe our clients might not want to see it through. Um, I know that, I've been at the org for a while now, and I've seen Katrina, and you've been at the org for a while too, and I just think I just really admired how much the safe team stretches, because of how emotional the work is. So just know that. So I want the folks here who are attending today to understand that too, is that, like, it's a really deep um emotional capacity that you have for these clients that are in these situations where they feel like they're super, super helpless in family situations, right? So just, yeah, just again, thank you, but just for sharing that too. So our next question will be, why is it important to address domestic violence through a culturally specific and immigration informed lens?
Barbara, do you want to take it or you want me to do it? Okay.
You can take it. It's okay.
Well, I have a really sad example of this. So, in language, some words of abuse don't translate as how we hear it in English. So, for instance, I always give an example that one of my clients who is Vietnamese, she didn't know that spousal rape was rape. And so, because in her home country, it wasn't considered rape. And
Mhm.
so in California, thankfully, it is. And it's illegal. So then after speaking with us, only after speaking with us, and after kind of hashing through the abuses that she had suffered, she realized that she is a survivor of spousal rape. And so those kind of cultural differences. Barbara mentioned that before about how, oh, it's okay in my home country, so then it would be here, fine here, but it's not. And some other cultural differences too. One example I would like to give is that I didn't learn until I came to AJSOCAL that in some of our Asian countries, gambling is illegal. And so I would have survivors who had just come from their home countries, and they would tell me, "Oh, my abuser is a gambler." And so then, like as if it was something shocking to me. But for them, that is shocking. That is someone that is willing to do something that is illegal in their home country with no care. And so then, if they're willing to do something illegal there, how far are they willing to go, even if you were to seek relief against them? So that's the mindset that they're coming with. So then I had to shift my own mindset, understanding, okay, gambling is a dangerous thing in their home country. So then that's why they're telling me this. It creates a different frame of lens of why this person is afraid of their abuser. Those are just small examples. And then there are familial pressures that a lot of our survivors experience and that we can empathize with,
Hmm.
that we kind of realize. And then also just the stigma that comes with, because, in some of our cultures, speaking of sex or being sexually assaulted cannot even be spoken about
Hmm.
or mentioned to any family members because for whatever reason, blame might be shifted to you, even if it's not your fault.
Yeah.
So those are the kind of um, that's the kind of lens that you have to remember when speaking to our API survivors. And so we try to reframe to put ourselves in that position so that to make it seem that why it's reasonable why they wouldn't seek help or seek help if they do.
And I guess, Katrina, to your last point, it's like this idea of like saving face, which is common in Asian cultures across like the wide continent. Um, and which I will say also is a common thing against for a lot of communities of color. That like bringing shame to the family and speaking up is not always encouraged. And so that's why we also really want to honor a survivor's decision to come and ask us for help because we know that's one huge step for them to feel like liberated, to feel that kind of like next step for themselves and kind of a path of clarity. So yeah, thank you everyone for the answer. And I will move to the next question, which is how can we help SAFE's work? What is the best way to engage, support the community as a volunteer and or community member? Great
Oh,
question for the
that is
audience.
a great
Yeah.
question. Um, so we love our pro bono attorneys. We love our volunteers. We hold clinics we hold multiple clinics with our shelters, but also we have a safe space clinic every sexual assault awareness month, so April, and every domestic violence awareness month in October, where we provide services to our survivors and free legal consultations on the weekends and when they're available. And so volunteers that can come, we love that. We also are holding emergency planning clinics to help our survivors prepare or our families prepare for the very worst if they are separated during the hard times of this administration, to prepare paperwork in the case that happens, or to have their custody and everything that needs to be prepared in case they're removed and away from their children, including passports and things like that. I see some of our community affiliates here supporting it today. So we come together and we have a bunch of volunteers that come for that. Some of our volunteers even assist with something that you wouldn't think of, like if you come for a legal consultation, and you're the sole caregiver of a child, we have a child activity room where our volunteers come and it's a safe place for them to stay while their parents or guardians are getting consultation. So it's a very unique thing that we provide. But aside from that, if donating would be great. I will be frank, our unit, as many of our organizations and affiliate domestic violence support services have experienced, we got a lot of our funding cut in the past since the administration change. And so, donors have stepped up and we appreciate it, and we welcome it because we don't know what the future is going to look like for our federal funding, and we've been, really impacted by it. And the more financial support that we get, the more capacity that we can, one, provide full scope representation to our clients, which, as Barbara and I described, it's so important to provide, to be able to navigate that system with someone that you can trust and has the ability to provide that kind of assistance. But to also allow us as staff who support domestic violence survivors to not reach burnout, to take care of ourselves so we can take care of our community as well. So that's how you can support.
Thanks, Katrina. And then another question I have is, um, there's a shortage of court interpreters, which is a big problem. Is there maybe a bilingual glossary of legal terms that exist in Asian languages? Somewhere people can go where the terms are in, yeah, API languages?
I wish there was.
Hmm.
I wish there was. And thankfully, because there are some words that don't, you're right, there are some
Hmm.
words that don't I'm not aware of one,
Hmm.
but there are some words that are hard to translate and interpret from
Hmm.
one language to another, especially legal terms.
Yeah.
And so working with interpreters is like something that we're really passionate about. And so we work really hard with our ALIP advocates um, to make sure that it's understandable and digestible by our clients,
Hmm.
so they know the next steps because it's their livelihood that we're dealing
Yeah.
with. But I wish there was. That's a great question. I wish there was a glossary of these legal terms that would be bilingual for our clients.
And for folks that don't know, actually, ALIP stands for Asian Language Legal Intake Project.
Yes. Thank you.
And we serve our services are in Asian languages, which include Thai, Tagalog, Vietnamese, Korean, Hindi, and and others. So if you ever need language assistance, we can offer you language and help in those in the languages. If we can't, we'll find a referral to another partner. But just know that we will take any client who is API or not API, who is monolingual. Because we want to just make sure everyone gets the help. I think I have time for one last question, which is going to be how strong is our collective marketing outreach for DV and LAOC for APAC communities? I mean general street outreach and tabling, but also larger ways like billboards and signs for getting help and understanding domestic abuse. I feel like larger interface signs might be able to empower multiple family members as they see them, rather than one person taking a flyer and they'll be thrown away or could maybe be hidden or retrieved by the potential abuser. So, is there a maybe plan amongst like maybe legal advocates about doing a large mainstream marketing campaign for APEC communities? Katrina or Barbara?
Well, safety planning is really important. They did point that out. And we actually are part of a coalition. It's the API Safe Coalition that provides assistance to sexual assault and DV survivors in LA County for API survivors, particularly. And we talk about this often. Oh, I see a lot of our coalition members here, and I appreciate you being here. And we talk about this how, in language, messaging is important, but it's odd because it has to be discreet for our survivors. So I know recently the Thai community had done a trafficking plan where they anti-trafficking plan where for a lot of the survivors that may be working um, in unsafe with unsafe employers, they had marketing for them in language in Thai. And it really depends on what the community needs. And for those coalitions, we come together and we kind of react that way and we provide that material. But all of our organizations, we tried to give everything in language as much as possible. But again, I'm looking at a lot of our shelter organizations here too that do really they have very discreet marketing
Mm.
where it looks like something else, but it's actually information about how to get to their shelter and to safety, which they've done it uniquely. So I give kudos to a lot of them, but for our org specifically, like we put our faces out there, but it's a very and so then they know that we're accessible.
Mhm.
But there are safety issues there too because abusers see us in court. And then in terms of marketing and in language, we try to keep it one-on-one with our advocates as much as possible. So it's a hard balance. But we're a table. You'll probably see us at a lot of tabling events, community events, because we know it's important to get ourselves out there. So then we know that the survivors know that we're supported. So
And I think just to add on to, I think I just lost my thought. Sorry. Sorry, I lost my thought. Sorry about that. I think we have time for one more question, which is, can immigration-related threats, fear of deportation, concerns about possible international child abduction be considered by the family court as coercive control or domestic violence factors in because of cases involving a young child? Was that clear? Sorry.
yes.
Oh, okay.
Barbara, I'm going to have you do this because it has to do with coercive control. And
No problem. So, I mean, yes, yeah, like can immigration-related threats, fear of deportation, be considered by family court as, yes, absolutely. All of those things are what we mentioned from the family code section earlier. All of these things and anything else that's happening in that relationship will be considered by the court as sort of the totality of the circumstances in determining whether abuse occurred. So the answer is absolutely yes.
Thank you, Barbara. Oh, my point from earlier was that what's helpful, I think, in terms of like the marketing and kind of that campaign type of idea is that for the folks here who are joining us today who aren't in this work, who aren't in either DV assistance, shelter work, or movement work, I think it's important for you to share this with your loved ones, with your community members. If you hear of someone maybe going through something, think about us and think about how you can refer them to us, or um, you also help. We might not be able to do it because of safety reasons, like campaigns around DV, but if you think about us when in your back pocket when someone comes up to you or shares something with you in private looking for help, that's a big way for us to do it too. In the meantime, as we get money or possible thoughts around a possible campaign. So yeah, just a thought there. Before I close, I want to ask Katrina and Barbara if they have any closing thoughts before I kind of move us into this next part.
Um, I just really, again, I want to reaffirm and really point out how powerful it's been for this past week that you all have been giving your time to participate in this webinar series. Um, you know, our community has a strong face, and for many reasons, and we put up, a lot of it's part of our culture that we have to be strong. But we're we're suffering. Our survivors are suffering, and I just again, it's very, very powerful to know that we're not alone, and that so many of you are so willing to support and do as much as possible for our survivors and our immigrant community, and just come collectively to represent our community. So it's been very, very hopeful, and I really, really appreciate it.
Hey, Katrina. Barbara, anything from you? No? Okay. So I just want to say also, before I close, I'll say that, it is API Heritage Month and it's a cause for a lot of celebration. But we here also at AJSOCAL want to also take a moment to like educate and spread awareness. Our community can only celebrate if we're empowered and if we feel like we have the community backing foundation around us to ensure that we can live these like thriving lives. Um, so I know that, this is really heavy stuff today, and this week is a look at like some really hard things that our community has to go through. Um, but it's a part of our lives. It's a part of our futures. It's a part of our current times. And as we celebrate Heritage Month, this is also part of it too, which is education and awareness. So again, thank you for joining us. So again, huge thank you to Barbara and Katrina today for leading us in this discussion, for sharing your expertise, educating us on the APEC experience with DV and abuse. So thank you all as well, all of our attendees. for your thoughtful questions, committing your time again this whole week to learn about our API immigrant communities. We've enjoyed being on this journey with you together, building an immigration narrative that is inclusive of all communities and especially our unique experiences, so that together as a city, as a region, as a state, as a country, we can counter dangerous generalizations that hide the challenges our communities face. Throughout this incredible, robust week, we have heard AJSOCAL staff and community partners share stories, data, and lived experience that challenge stereotypes and deepen our understanding of the API immigrant reality. Our speakers have given us the knowledge and tools and resources to better understand how immigration is an API issue, and why we must engage in this moment to advocate for all immigrants. So we invite you all to learn more about the API experience through AJSOCAL's many reports and resources, including the Community of Contrast website, which is communityofcontrast.org. We also encourage you to sign up for AJSOCAL's newsletter and to follow us on social media, which can be done through our AJSOCAL website, so ajsocal.org. This recording, all of the recordings will be shared next week, so please keep an eye out for that announcement in your inbox, and there'll also be a link to a brief evaluation as well. We want to do these throughout the year and more often, and we can only kind of get them better and more improved if we have your feedback. So please take some time for that as well. And finally, I would say thank you again for joining us today and this whole week. Happy API Heritage Month. Stay engaged, stay curious. Please take care of each other and have a great restful weekend. Thank you all.